Hobby with Cage, episode 265, brought to you by Arena Club and Bleecker Trading. The elf on the shelf. I thought I was done talking about this, but a couple people sent me some clips recently of some additional shows talking about auction guidelines and that kind of stuff. Jeremy Lee, I like the guy. He's got some quotes out there and some stuff, and it's funny. I'm gonna, like I do, take the counter position here. So let's just talk about shilling for a second because I think everybody agrees it shouldn't happen. But the easiest instance here is somebody puts a card in an auction, there's no reserve on it, and they really want a specific price for a card. Let's say they want that card to sell for $10,000. And you, a bidder, are willing to pay $10,000 for the card. No one else is. Now, the bid gets to $2, $3, $4, $5,000. You're the high bidder at 5, but the seller doesn't want to sell the card for less than 10, and you're willing to buy it for 10. If this was a private transaction at a card show, everything would be great. You'd pay 10, you try to get it for less, the seller wouldn't take less, and the seller would hold. He'd make you bid yourself up to 10, and he'd be willing to sell it for 10. Maybe he really wanted 12, but bare minimum 10. He has this reserve price in his brain, but never set a reserve, and he put it for auction, and he probably should have put a reserve, but he didn't. So instead of putting a reserve, he does the wrong thing and shills the card up and bids on it and makes you bid 6. And then he bids 7, makes you bid 8. He bids 9, makes you bid 10. Boom. You've now paid what you're willing to pay for the card to get the card. You've now paid 10 and he's sold the card for 10. Now, the situation I just gave is completely wrong. It is unethical, it is immoral, and in some instances illegal, definitely violative of more auction house terms than not. And when you put a card for auction, you're supposed to let it go. And obviously the buyer in that instance, they were screwed by the seller because they should have gotten the card for $5,000 or $6,000. Get a bargain for that card. And that is where the craziness comes from this, right? The fire on this topic. Like, wow, I just got screwed. I was scammed. This is fraud. I should have been able to buy this card for less. So what's the fix? Everybody says, well, if you have this reserve price, if you only want to sell it for 10, then you have to sell it with a reserve. That's been the universal talking point of everyone in the hobby. Sell it with a reserve. Sell it, but make sure that if you're not willing to sell it for less than 10, that there's a reserve price. Okay. Same two situations. Now keep in mind, the buyer is willing to pay 10. The buyer is happy to pay 10 because let's put ourselves in the shoes of the buyer. If you're not willing and happy to pay 10, don't bid 10. Whether you're being shilled up or bidding against 3 other people who really want the card, we have to start with the baseline that you as the bidder are willing to pay $10,000 for this card. Because if you're not, you shouldn't be bidding. You should not be bidding $10,000 to get this card. I understand the indignation here. I understand the anger. I understand that I should have gotten that card for less. But here's where it gets fun. Because the hobby pitchforks are out. And everybody knows shilling is wrong. Everybody knows it's wrong. But the fix was, well, you should sell it with a reserve. Okay. So option 2, you bring it to an auction house. The auction house knows your reserve price is $10,000 and they put it up for auction. And maybe they don't reveal the reserve price until the day before. I know Heritage reveals the reserve price before the auction ends. Some auction houses have secret reserves. You don't know what the reserve is. Sometimes they just say reserve's not met. Sometimes you don't even know there's a reserve on the auction when you're bidding on it. Every auction is a little different. And the fun part here is, let's use the exact same example, the same card, the reserve on it is 10, and you're the bidder willing to pay 10, happy to win the card for 10. But it's just you bidding beyond 5 or 6. But in that instance, because it's now sent to the auction house with a reserve, the way that the hobby has told everyone is the fix for shilling. We talked about option number one here. We talked about fact pattern number one, and everyone's like, can't do that. You can't bid on your own card. You should have sold it with a reserve. Okay, well, now in fact pattern two, they are selling at the reserve. And under the guidelines of this particular auction house, once you got to five, the auction house is able to bid up under the reserve to get the card to the reserve. They bid six, you bid seven, they bid eight, etc., etc., 8,500, nine, until you finally bid that 10. And boom, you've paid, sure, your limit. You're not as happy as if you would have got it for 8, but you're still happy because you're the one deciding to bid that 10. And the auction house has served its purpose of getting you to pay as much as you're willing to pay and still be happy, but also now getting the card to the price where the seller is willing to pay it, is willing to sell it, excuse me. The same thing would happen if you were at a show, right? And it was an in-person transaction or a private deal. I want to sell the card, but I'm not taking less than 10. You want to get as good of a price, you offer 5. Now let's just say I had a middleman standing between us. Say, no, can you get, I'll bid 6. No, I'll bid. I understand that the thoughts of this gives the indication of more bidding action. It gives the indication there's more interest on the card. That's a psychological thing. Ultimately, when you get down to it, the hobby has a great way of just being mad no matter what the situation is. And trust me, in this instance, I understand it because a lot of this is kind of hidden stuff. But we've got the clear-cut fact pattern A of no reserve, the owner of the card shilling the card up to get you to where they're willing to sell it. Wrong. I don't think anybody's going to argue it's not. But where it gets fun is the universal fix that the hobby has come up with is sell it with an auction house, make sure there's a reserve. And now the hobby's mad about that. Even though at base, all we have happening here with these auction houses serving a purpose, what you have to realize is I know you're mad about this reserve and the auction house bidding it up. If the auction house didn't do that, your bid would be $5,000 and you wouldn't win the card. The seller wouldn't sell the card. So you wouldn't get it for a bargain. There is no bargain to be had. The seller tells the auction house, I will sell this, but only if it gets to 10. So the seller is mediating in a way by placing these bids to get the card to the reserve. And remember, you control whether you hit bid or not. And if you bid that $10,000 to get the card, you've now finally gotten enough bidding to where the seller is willing to sell the card. That part, I understand some of the frustration because the terms of these auction houses are long, they're voluminous, they're hard to read, they're hard to get through. And secret auctions or with reserves bidding up to an auction price or up to one bid below the reserve price, it's just something that's not really talked about. But when you think about it, that's the way you get the card. And everybody's like, oh man, it's ridiculous. I'm bidding against myself. I'm bidding against the owner of the card with the reserve. I'm bidding against the auction house. No, you're not. The card has a fixed price. Think of it the same way as if you reached out to someone on Instagram and offered them a price for the card and they said, no, my price is this. The auction house is getting you to that price so that a deal can happen. And if that didn't happen, you would not get the card. So anyway, it's a funny thing. I've had some conversation with some really smart people in the hobby about this, and I've seen sort of the back and forth on this issue. And option A, fact pattern A, I think we can all agree, very wrong. But when we talk about it and we say, okay, I know what the fix is put it in an auction and put a reserve price. Don't shill your own card up, sell it at a reserve. Well, then when that happens, the hobby still finds a way to say that's wrong. The auction house shouldn't be doing this, but you miss the point. And the point is this. As a bidder, you were not getting that card for 6. You were not getting that card for 7 or 8. You were only going to get that card if the auction house got you up to the reserve at 10. That's the only way you win that card. So any frustration about this, any oh man, I got defrauded, or I could have gotten the card for less money than this. It's wrong. And you got to think about it that way. At least that's where I'm thinking about this morning. We're heading towards the holidays. Call me your elf on a shelf. I don't know. Elf on a shelf. But Shilling, bad. Reserve prices, not bad. Perhaps the auction houses can, do a better job of educating the folks about what their practices are, because it seems like a lot of people didn't know that this stuff goes on. But when you think about it in the way that I think I just set it out, hopefully you understand why this is done, right? Because with a reserve price and the auction house placing the bids to get the card to the reserve, or placing bids up to that reserve, all they're doing is making a deal happen that would not otherwise happen. And at base, that auction house can't get you to place that last bid. That is your decision. That is you hitting the bid saying, I'm willing to pay this price. And if they get you to one bid below the reserve and you say, yes, I'm willing to pay this price, they've done their job, which is get a buyer and a seller and a meeting of the minds at a price that they're both willing to transact at. And that would not have happened if not for this process. I just want to make sure everybody understands that, because we have a lot of indignation here about secret reserves and auction houses placing bids. I want the folks out there to understand why it's done. And if you actually talk about it in that way, instead of yelling about how I'm bidding against myself or I'm bidding against the owner of the card, not the case. And even if it is the case, you were never going to win. If that didn't happen, you would have put your bid in and the auction would have ended and you would have got a reserve not met on this card. And if you're willing to pay a price, isn't the auction house doing you a service too as the bidder? They're basically letting you know what you have to pay to get the card. And then the decision, personal responsibility then falls on you. If it's one bid too much, don't bid. Because you weren't getting a bargain on a card. And if Shilling's bad and the fix is putting a reserve in an auction, let's not also jump down the throats of the auction house and say reserves are bad too. Because then we just become the hobby, when nothing is a fix and everything is a problem. And who wants to be involved in that? Brought to you today by Arena Club and Card Ladder, but the opinions are all mine. I'll talk to you guys soon. It's another episode of The Hobby with Cage. Hope you enjoyed this one. I did.